Hey everyone, Sim for the Future here, and today we're going to do a little video about conventions, and more importantly about breaking conventions, because nothing is more fun than doing whatever is not allowed, right? So in music production there are a lot of conventions and a lot of kind of rules, and that's all good and well, and often those rules are made by people who are highly successful and achieve a lot of stuff, but at the same time, often when you start to mess around with the rules, you get the most interesting effects. So every now and then you just need to go a little bit Rage Against the Machine and just say, fuck it, I won't do what you tell me, and you just put the pineapple on the pizza, because it's actually delicious, and anyone who says otherwise is just wrong. With that controversial statement out of the way, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do today. So, this video is specifically aimed at effects change, and I'm going to demo this on guitar. Now, my guitar playing isn't anything special, and neither is this guitar. It's an ESP LTD F105 FM. It's old, it has all kinds of issues, just like my playing, so it's a perfect fit. If anything works on this guitar, with my playing, it's viable. Let's put it that way. So the convention with guitar effects, and I'm going to use VSTs because I wanted to use a pedal board, but it's very annoying to move stuff around on a pedal board quickly. So I'm going to use VSTs, and I'm going to break the convention of pedal order. Now there's one thing I won't touch, and that's the compressor, and that's mainly because my playing dynamics are pretty shit. So I need that compressor at the front of the chain, just to keep things a little bit in order. Aside from that, we're going to mess with basically everything, and I'm going to show you the advantages and disadvantages of doing so. So next time you're playing around with guitars and effects, you can actually think, hey, I actually want to do an effect like that, and you'll know how to do this. For this roundup of plugins, I'm using exclusively very cheap or free things. Solaris is for free, M-Tremolo is for free, the Phaser plugin you see at the top is also for free, and we have, it's inverted, Sandman Pro and Dent by Unfiltered Audio. It's really awkward to point at, there, somewhere. Those can be picked up for around 10 to 20 bucks on the Plugin Alliance webshop at most times. There's a sale right now, so you can grab those for pretty cheap. So let's go through our effects chain in our traditional way, and then we start to mess around, and I'll show you some effects you can obtain once you start to mess around. So this is just the compressor, obviously is on, and we have our distortion. Pretty standard stuff. Traditionally, we would go from a distortion into a modulation. So for that, we're using this Phaser plugin by Adam Sabo. Brilliant little plugin. Also supports stereo, which is a nice bonus. After the chorus, traditionally we get a tremolo. For this we're using M-Tremolo from the Free Effects bundle by Melda. And this is also in a pretty wide stereo spread. Nice and ping-pongy. Then we get into the timed effects, and the convention is you have a delay and then the reverb. So for delay, we are using Unfiltered Audio Sandman Pro, set to a pretty mild quarter note without feedback. And we and our traditional chain with a little Solaris reverb, also by Adam Szabo, also for free, and you can find a video about that on my channel as well. And that's our pretty traditional FX chain. So let's mess around with that, because that's the fun part. The first thing I really like, I'm going to take out the tremolo and the Sandman for now, is putting the modulation after the reverb. And the cool thing about putting the modulation after the reverb is that your modulation doesn't get as washed out, so you get a lot more modulation back from the actual modulation source. And I think this is a very cool effect. So let's do it traditionally, modulation before reverb. And then we move to modulation after reverb. I would typically dial it down a little bit. It's a bit much right now, so you probably want to dial back the feedback just a bit to compensate for that extra effect. But I think it's a very cool effect to have the phaser after the reverb to get that extra kick. You can also do this, of course, with a chorus or a flanger. And if you're ever questioning whether you should buy a flanger or a chorus, you should always buy a flanger if it has a feedback setting, because a chorus is basically a flanger without feedback. So buying that flanger will give you extra options. Another hot take, worth to a good video, right? So that's a cool thing you can do. If you want extra modulation, put your modulation after your reverb. That's a cool trick. Now there's another little cool trick which you can do with the modulation, especially in stereo. You can actually put the modulation before your reverb or before your distortion, which is a pretty cool effect as well. So this is traditionally, you would have your distortion and then your modulation. Now we move it before. Really tends to fatten up that distortion sound. Because if we turn the phaser off, to me it gives that kind of old school rock sound. It's a bit like the blues rock kind of vibe. I think it's a cool effect, especially if you have the option to do stereo. It's a very cool effect to have that modulation before your distortion. So do give that a shot, because it's really fun. Moving things around, let's do something a little bit less conventional. Let's take our reverb and move our reverb before the distortion. It's also a very spicy little thing to do. Now for this we're probably going to have to dial down the reverb a little bit, and I will turn off the shimmer for now, so we just get a reverb. And let's start off with the traditional order of having your reverb after your distortion. It's important to note if you have a reverb with pre-delay, if you move it before the distortion, you essentially get a free delay as well. So if we were to sync this, we can actually add a eighth note delay, for instance. It's not exactly the effect I was going for, so let's turn it off. If you need things to get particularly nasty, you can crank up the reverb size and add a little bit of that shimmer reverb back in to get a kind of a high octave extra sound in your distortion, which gets very nasty very quickly. So you want to be a little bit careful with this. But once again, for that kind of stoner nastiness, fuzzy sound, it's actually a very cool move to make. So I would highly recommend just giving that a shot whenever you're feeling like making a lot of noise. Let's add the phaser back in after all of this mess. And that's the traditional order again. So as you can see, I didn't change any of the settings of the plugins, and you get a pretty dramatic shift in tone. And I think that's a very cool thing with, especially since we're doing this digital, it's very easy to just move things around. And I think people shouldn't be afraid of doing that because it creates new sounds and new experiences, which is, I think, important in music. It's not just about conventions, it's also about just doing things a little bit different every now and then. So that's our little distortion roundup. Let's talk a little bit about reverb and delay, which are in the traditional order always stacked in the you take your delay and then you take your reverb order. And that's to kind of wash out the delay sound. The advantage here being that if you put the delay first, you will get a bit more of a crispy delay before it gets washed out by the reverb. So let's actually switch to clean for this. And just to make it a little bit more easy to hear where the notes are, let's turn off the shimmer. If you switch these around, you will get the reverb before your delay. So you're delaying the reverb signal, so you're washing out the sound first before repeating it back. So it gets a little bit more washy. So if you're looking for something a little bit softer and a little bit more washed out, the best order I think you can do this is actually putting the reverb before the delay, even though that's against conventions. Talking about moving the delay around, let's just do another little fun trick. Let's move the delay way up in the chain and let's put it before the distortion. Now, generally, when you have distortion and delay, the entire point is to not make things too messy. So you distort the signal and then you delay it. If you turn it around, you will see you get some interesting results as well. So for the most part, it isn't too extremely different. But the fun thing here is once you switch notes, you actually get more distortion. Not an effect that's going to work for everything. Probably not recommended if you want to play a little bit faster, but this can be an interesting little effect every so often, I guess. It's one to be a little bit careful with, but still fun to just mess around with. Let's see, what haven't we done yet? The tremolo in general is not the most interesting effect to move around unless you move it before a delay, which kind of works against it. So what you can do is you can have a tremolo, for instance, so just a... this is a very rotary speaker stereo penny-like thing in this setting. So if we take a delay, and the fun thing with sandpen is you can just pan it all the way to one side. Now we just get the delay left. And if we use the cross feedback, we can push the feedback to the opposite side. So now it will delay left, then it will delay 35% to the right, 35% to the left, etc. And if we push this against the tremolo, that actually works out pretty well. A little bit of reverb in there. Tiniest bit. Quite a nice little wide stereo field sort of effect. Again, a little bit specific maybe for some genres, but still a pretty fun thing to play around with. Things you can also do is move the distortion way back in the chain, so really just invert the entire thing, which is odd, but also pretty satisfying. So let's actually do the inverted chain to finish off with, and then we can play a little bit around with sound. But I think this is a pretty good demo of just showing you some arrangements and where it will end up if you do it that way. So if we flip the arrangement around, should have, let's see, reverb, delay, tremolo, modulation, distortion. Yep, that should be good. So this is the entire inverted chain. That's definitely an acquired taste. But some of these techniques are pretty good and definitely worth trying out. Like the reverb before distortion is a very good one. The phase at the end of the chain is really good, and the phase before distortion are definitely things I would highly recommend you check out if you want to get just a little bit of a different sound and just a little bit more kick out of your pedals. So that's my video for today. I may or may not follow this up with some unconventional ways to use effects on bass, maybe on drums, who knows. I often lose track of series, so don't get your hopes up too high. But if you want to see more, just let me know down below. And if you have any unconventional things you like to do yourself, definitely drop them out below and we can give them a shot. So that's it for today. See ya.